Masechet Avoda Zara Daf Nun Zayin. Hahu Avoda Dahava b'Nehar De'ah. There's a story that happened in the city of Nehar De'ah. The Dashu Yisrael v'Goy lahu chamra, where a Jew and a non-Jew tread together on grapes. V'shahyeh Shemuel tilata rigleh. They came and they asked Shemuel, is it permitted or not? The fact that the non-Jew was stepping on the grapes while making them. And he did not answer them, and he waited 3 festivals. He waited Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot, many months before giving them an answer. So we wonder, Mai Ta'ama, why did Shemuel not give them an answer immediately? What was he waiting for? Ilema mishum de kasabad di mashkachna tana da asar kerebi Natan osrine afilu bahana'a. So maybe he was waiting to see if there was an opinion that would support the opinion of Rabbi Natan, who is stringent. So in other words, Shemuel for sure knew that this would be prohibited to drink. However, he thought maybe it would be also prohibited to even get benefit from. And so he wanted to see, is there a Tana, is there a source that will support the prohibition of Rabbi Natan to say it's prohibited even to get benefit from the Tanya. Now, what's the opinion of Rabbi Natan? We know his opinion from a Baraita. Medado ben beyad ben beregel yimacher. Rabbi Natan omer bayad asur, beregel mutar. If a non-Jew put his hand or his foot into a barrel of wine in order to measure it. So his intention is only to measure it, and so therefore we can assume his intention is not to make it a libation. So therefore, since he did it only to measure, it's permitted to sell it. The Jew can still sell it. That means he can get benefit from it. But you see here, Tanakama says he cannot drink it. So that's the law. Even though we assume he did not make it yayin nesech, still, in terms of drinking it, we're extra stringent. It seems that the problem really is not only the making it yayin nesech, but stam yanam, to have less socializing between Jews and non-Jews. So that is a stringency. But since he had no intention, therefore, he can get benefit from it according to Tanakama. Rabbi Natan omer biyad asur baregel mutar. Rabbi Natan makes a distinction, and he says if the non-Jew put his finger in to measure the level of the wine in the barrel with his hand, then it's prohibited to drink and prohibited to even get benefit from it. Can't even sell it. If he did it with his foot, then it's okay, it's permitted. So perhaps Shemuel did not give an answer because he knew that according to Tanakama, it would be permitted to get benefit from it. But maybe the halacha should follow Rabbi Natan, and it would be prohibited to even get benefit from it. And he knows Rabbi Natan said that as a da'at yachid. Does he have support? He was waiting, asking around, does anyone have a baraita, another source that would support Rabbi Natan? Now, is that what he was waiting for? We say no. Emar damar Rabbi Natan beyad, baregel mi'amar. Even Rabbi Natan, who was stringent, was only stringent if the non-Jew touched the wine with his hand. But with the foot, he said mutar. He never was stringent regarding a foot, and this is a case where they were treading on the grapes. So that's only with their feet. So even Rabbi Natan would not be stringent in such a case. So he wasn't waiting for that. Rather, the opposite. He was waiting for a leniency. We know that Rabbi Shimon, this is in a Mishnah coming up in a few dapim, Rabbi Shimon says when someone has no intention to make something yayin nesech, if a non-Jew is touching it not with intention for that, then it's permitted. So he wanted to see, is there another source that will support Rabbi Natan, and then he can permit this even to drink. So the standard would be, as we said over here, according to Rabbanan, would be that it's permitted to drink but not to sell. But he wanted to know maybe he can follow the minority opinion of Rabbi Shimon and even permit them to drink it, and that's what he was waiting for. That's why he didn't give an answer. Hahu Avoda, another story. Dava Biram happened in the city of Biram. Dehahu goy dava kasalik bedikla, vaite luliba, beade de kanachit, naga berosha de luliba, behamra, shelo bechavana, shariarav lezabone legoyim. Or a certain non-Jew, he climbed up a palm tree, and he took a palm branch with him, and then when he was coming down the palm tree, by mistake, the tip of the palm tree touched some wine. Shelo bechavana, not without intention. This without intention is a little bit different than the previous one. In the previous one, he had intention to touch it, but only to measure, not for a libation. Here he had no intention at all. But so we're going to see various definitions of no intention. The next one's going to be that of a child who doesn't know what idolatry is, who touches it, but again, it's without intention to make it idolatry because he doesn't know what intention is. But these all have, even though there are different different types, subcategories of not having intention, but they're all within the same broad category. So here he did not even have intention for it to touch the water at all. And they came and they asked Rav, and Rav said, you can sell it to non-Jews. He didn't say that they can drink it, but it's okay, they can sell it because it was touched without intention. Amiru lo Rav Kana v'Ravase leRav. However, Rav Kana Ravase asked Rav, v'hamor hu damar tinok ben yomo hu ose yenesech. He says, but master, you yourself have ruled that a child that's even 1 day old, a baby, who's not Jewish, who touches wine, makes it yayin nesech. Now, a baby who's 1 day old certainly has no intention, doesn't know what wine is, doesn't know what idolatry is, and yet makes it prohibited. So how come over here you said they can sell it, but you also said previously that it's prohibited. Amar lehu emud amri ana b'shtiya, b'ana mi amar, and Rav explains, when I said that when a baby touches it, he makes it yayin nesech, I only meant that it becomes prohibited to drink. That's all. But to get benefit, did I say anything about that? You can get permitted to get benefit. So there you go. If there's no intention, it's permitted to get benefit, and that's what I meant over here. Also, with this guy who went up and got the palm and brought it down, he said you can sell it. It's okay to get benefit from it. You just can't drink it. Gufa Amarav Tinok ben Yomo Ose Yain Nesech. Let's analyze the statement of Rav further, that a baby, a non-Jew who touches wine, makes it prohibited. We said that means prohibited for drinking. Itibe Rav Shimi bar Chia leRav. Rav Shimi bar Chia challenged Rav from a baraita that teaches halokech avadim min hagoyim shemalu velo tablu v'chen b'nei shefachot shemalu velo tablu rukan umid rasan bashuk tameh v'amrila tahor. If someone buys a slave from non-Jews, so this is an Eved Kena'ani, it's a non-Jewish slave. Now the halacha is that they are supposed to do, if it's a man, do Brit Milah and go to Tevilah, which is a process of conversion. Now, even after they do both of those things, they remain an Eved Kena'ani, that is Chayav in mitzvot, like women are mitzvot aseh, shelo hazeran gerama. However, that status of being an Eved Kena'ani that's Chayav in mitzvot only applies if they do both Brit Milah and Tevilah. When the Jew first buys the Eved before he undergoes that process, so then they have the status totally of a Kena'ani, of a non-Jew. So now they're in an in-between status, where this man, he did Brit Milah, but didn't yet do Tevilah, so he didn't yet finish the process. Now, the law is going to be that an Eved Kena'ani who finished the whole process is not going to make things yayin nesech, because they don't do idolatry. They're already chayav in mitzvot. But before they did Tevilah, maybe they will do idolatry, so that would be a problem. And furthermore, the sons of Shefachot. Now, let's say a shivcha. If a shivcha does tevilah and then has a child, the child has the status of has a boy. The child has the status of an Eved Kena'ani who's chayav mitzvot, no problem. But let's say the shivcha did not do tevilah, didn't do tevilah yet. They didn't get a chance to do it, or she refuses to do it. and has a child while owned by the Jewish master, so then that son is totally not Jewish and has to do Brit Milah and Tevilah. So what if he does one but not the other? So we have two cases here of someone that needs to do a conversion process. It's like a conversion process. They don't become 100% Jewish right away, but they become an Eved Kanani, which who are Chayavim be mitzvot, but they did only half of the process. And so just to get this clear, the first case is a slave what that one buys off on the market and did Brit Milah, but not Tevilah. And the other one is a son of a Shifcha that did Brit Milah, but not Tevilah. In those cases, the law is Rukan, Umidrasan, Bashuk, Tameh, that their spit and something that they put their weight upon will cause Tum'ah, and that is true even in the marketplace. So this is a halacha midrabanan, midoraita. Non-Jews don't cause tum'ah, but the rabbis made a gezerah, so that non-Jews, and that will include these people who went through half a process but not a full process. So their spit makes things tameh, and anything that they put their weight on also makes things tameh, and that's true even in public. The difference between public and private is for safek. When one has a safek, whether something is tameh or not, in public, we're lenient. In private, we're stringent. Over here, we're saying that they're tameh even in public. So that would mean that in a matter of doubt, we would be stringent. That's the one opinion. Amri la tahor. There's another opinion that say, no, they're tahor. They did Brit Milah, so they're halfway there. So that's good enough. They have to do the rest of it to finish the process. But in the meantime, that makes their spit and something that they put their weight upon is tahor. All that is halacha number 1 regarding Tuman Tahara. The Baraita continues and says regarding the same categories. It seems it's applying to both categories. The Gemara will discuss. Yenan gedolim osin yenesech ketanim en osim yenesech. Now regarding wine, that's just a person touches. If it's totally a non-Jew and they touch it, certainly that's going to make it prohibited. If it's Eved Kanani who did Tevilah and Milah and Tevilah, then they would not make a yain nesech. But what about these that are in between? So here's the law. It depends. If they are adults, gedolim, then, and they touch wine, they make a yain nesech. If ketanim, if they're children, then they do not make things yain nesech by touching them. How do you define that? Ve'elohen gedolim, ve'elohen ketanim. What's an adult? What's a minor? We're not going to say bar mitzvah for this because they're not yet Jewish to even be bar mitzvah. Gedolim yodim beti avoda zara umshamesheha. Ketanim enam yodim beti avoda zara umshamesheha. Adult means old enough to know about idolatry and how to serve it, whereas children means they don't understand yet about idolatry and its accessories and how it works. So therefore, since they have no da'at, so they don't know when they touch it, they're not having in mind any idolatry, and therefore, in those cases, they are permitted. That's the end of the Baraita. What's the point for us? Katanim mihat gedolim in, ketanim la. It says, adults, yes, they will make a yain nesech, but children do not make things yain nesech. That's a challenge to Rav, because Rav says that a non-Jew who is a baby makes something yain nesech. So Rav says it's prohibited, and this Baraita says that a child who touches it, he doesn't know what it is, so it's called not intentional, and it is permitted. So how can we explain this? And the answer is Targema abene shefachot. We can explain that this leniency is only regarding to the second category here of the children of shefachot. You have a shifcha, and she is not Jewish. She had a son. That son, although he did not do Tevilah yet, but still the son grew up in a Jewish home because it was already bought by the master. The shifcha was bought and then had a child afterwards. So because he was brought up in a Jewish home, so presumably he's not going to be connected to idolatry. That's the case where we can be lenient and say that the child who touches yain nesech is that the yain nesech is permitted. That's not different. Rav was talking about a regular non-Jew off the street who lives in a non-Jewish home. There, we're going to be stringent and say that a child who touches wine, the wine will be prohibited to drink. Now, how can you say that? After all, the Braita says vechen. It says case number 1 of someone that is bought, and then vechen, the same law. It seems like it's equating. The same law applies to the sons of the shefachot. Arukan umidrasan. And so the answer is no. The word vechen, to say that these two cases are equivalent, they're only equivalent regarding tum'ah and tahara. That just as the spit of someone who is bought on the marketplace makes things tameh, so too the spit of the son of a shifcha also makes things tameh. Even though they're lesser status because they grew up in this Jewish home, still they also make things tameh. The vechen is only going on that. But the next law about yayin, that the leniency for ketanim, in fact, only applies to the first case, but not the second case. That reading is possible according to the one who says that their spit and something that they put their weight on becomes tameh. Then you need both cases to teach me not only the person you bought from the marketplace, also the son of the maidservant also makes tameh. So you need vechen to teach me a chidush. But according to someone who says that the spit of both categories is permitted, so then you don't need to tell me the second one. Once you told me that the slave that one buys off from the marketplace, and you did milah, not tevilah, their spit is tahor, then all the more so the son who's born from the shivcha within the Jewish home, certainly his spit will be tahor. So we wouldn't need to say this whole clause at all, and especially now, because you're saying that this vechen is not talking about yain, but rather only talking about tum'ah, and the first case is already tahor, and so certainly this case would be more lenient. There would be no need to say it, and therefore you can only say that this halacha of yayin applies to the first category. That only makes sense for saying tameh. But if you say that yayin applies to read that the law of wine applies only to the first category, and the word vechen is only for the law of tum'ah and tahara, you can't read it that way according to the opinion that says tahor. So how are you going to answer for that opinion? כמשמען עבדים דומיה דבני שפחות. מה בני שפחות מלאו ולא טבלו? הוא דעושין ין נסך, מלאו וטבלו לה, אף עבדים כן. The answer is that word vechen comes to teach us that the law regarding the first category of slaves that one buys off the market is the same as the second category of the Bnei Shefachot, that just like the Bnei Shefachot, if they did Brit Milah, but not yet did Tevilah, that's where the adults, that they would cause Yayin Nesech. That's true. But if they did Brit Milah and they did Tevilah, then they would not. That's true for the Bnei Shefachot, those that grew up in the household that are adults. Their problem is only if they did Brit Milah, but not Tevilah. If they did Brit Milah and Brit Tevilah, that's it. They finished the whole process. So then they can touch wine. And just like that's true for the Bnei Shefachot, Af Avadim Ken, that's also true for the slaves who are themselves not born in the household, but rather bought on the market, that when they did Brit Milah but not Tevilah, there's still a problem. They're going to make Yayin Nesech. But once they did Brit Milah and Tevilah, that's it. They finished the whole process. Now it's okay. Now they can touch wine. So we need the word vechen to teach us that. So even though the word vechen, according to the one who says tahor, would not be needed to say tahor because it's a kal vachomer from the first case, but I still need vechen to teach us this. To teach us this comparison, that just like we will be lenient regarding someone who does Brit Milah and Tevilah, that they can touch it in the second case, so too in the first case, as long as the Eved did both processes, then that's it. They're okay and they can touch wine. Now, why would you think it would be a problem? They did. They did Brit Milah and Tevilah, so they did everything. Why would you think not? Well, actually, there is someone who is stringent about this, and we don't agree with him, and that's the opinion of Shemuel, the Amar of Nachman. Amar Shemuel alokech avadim min hagoyim, af al pi shemalu v'tablu, osin yenesech ad shetishaka avodah zara mipihem, kamashma lan dela. Shemuel was stringent and said, someone who buys a non-Jewish slave from non-Jews, and even though he did brit milah and tevilah, did the whole process as is appropriate, nevertheless, they still, if they touch wine, they will make it yayin nesech until Avodah Zara stops from their mouths. In other words, when someone goes through this conversion process, okay, they did it one day, but they're used to Avodah Zara. So still, whenever they're swearing or doing something, they'll say, oh, in the name of, and they'll name some Avodah Zara. They're still used to the Avodah Zara. They still have it in mind, and therefore we're afraid that even though they converted, they still, when they touch the wine, they're going to be automatic. They say beracha when they touches it to some idol. And so until they get used to it, we have to wait. We'll see how long that is to get used to it. So Shemuel was stringent and said, even though the slave did Brit Milah and Tevilah, still they make Yain Nesech, they could touch it and make Yain Nesech. So the Vechen comes to teach, not so. Just like the one who grew up in a Jewish household, who's not used to anything, he's not used to Avodah Zarah, he grew up in a Jewish household. So immediately upon Tevilah, for sure, the sons are going to be okay. Just like that's true, Vechen teaches me that leniency applies also in the case of adults who are bought and do milah and tevilah. Their wine that they touch is permitted immediately. Gufa. Let's analyze this further. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Shemuel. Halokech avadim nagoyim. אף על פי שמלאו וטבלו, עושים יהיה נסך עד שתשקע עבודה זרה מפיהם. וכמה, אמר רבי יהושע ben Levi, עד 12 חודש. Shemuel taught that someone who buys a slave from non-Jews, so it means it's a non-Jewish slave, even though they did brit milah and they went to the mikveh, still, if they touch wine, it becomes yain nesech until they forget about avodah zarah. How long is that? 12 months. After 1 year of getting used to something, then that's it, or it becomes natural. Iti be'rabal Rav Nachman. הלוקח עבדים מן הגויים שמלאו ולא טבלו, וכן בני השפחות שמלאו ולא טבלו, רוקן ומדרסן בשוק טמא. ואמרי לה טהור. ינן, גדולים עושים יין נסך, קטנים אין עושים יין נסך. אלו הם גדולים ואלו הם קטנים, גדולים שיודעים בטיב עבודה זרה ומשמשיה, קטנים שאין יודעים בטיב עבודה זרה ומשמשיה, קטנים מיהת, מלאו ולא טבלו אין, מלאו וטבלו לה. We now challenge the stringency of Rav Nachman in the name of Shemuel from the very same baraita that we quoted above. Above, we had it as a challenge to Rav, and then we reconciled it. And we said in that reconciliation that it is a challenge to Rav Nachman in the name of Shemuel. Now we're going to flip everything over and solve the challenge to Rav Nachman in the name of Shemuel, although this will end up with a challenge against Rav. So this baraita is going to be a challenge to one or the other, depending on how you interpret it. So let's go through it again. The baraita teaches that if someone buys a slave themselves and they did only brit milah but not tevilah, or if a slave is born in their household because they bought the shivcha, and that shivcha had a child before doing tevilah, and so that child needs brit milah and tevilah. So in either of those two cases, their spit and anything that they put their weight on is going to be tameh. Some say it's tahor. Wine, if any of these, we're assuming now it's applying to both of these cases. If it's an adult, then such a person makes the wine nesech. If it's a child, they do not. What's the difference between an adult and a child? For this law, the adult is someone that understands idolatry and its accessories, and a child does not. What's our main point? It says, and in any case, that malu velo tablu in malu vetablu la. There's only a problem of yain nesach if they did brit milah, but they didn't do tevilah. They didn't finish the process of tevilah, so then it's going to probably be a problem if they touch yain nesach. But we should be able to infer from that if they did brit milah and they did tevilah, they finished the whole process, then there's no problem of yain nesech. This is a challenge to the law of Rav Nachman, name of Shemuel, that even after someone does tevilah, milah and tevilah, still they make yain nesech for another year. So challenge tirgema of bnei shefachot, and so we say, no, this inference that you're making, that would be a leniency, that once they do tevilah also, then it's permitted. that would only apply to the children that grow up in the Jewish home. There's no reason to wait. Because they grew up in the Jewish home, they're not used to idolatry, so they're permitted right away. But if it's someone that was bought on the slave market, or just any non-Jew who converts, then you have to wait 12 months. V'chen katane, yeah, but doesn't the Baraita say the word v'chen, which equates the two categories, someone who is bought directly from the slave market and someone who grows up in a Jewish home, so aren't those the same? And therefore, the one that grows in a Jewish home is their wine is permitted immediately. So too, the one who converts as an adult who is bought on the slave market also, we should say the same thing, that whatever they touch is permitted as soon as they do tivi. Challenge again to Shemuel. Arukanu midrasa. No, the word v'chen comes to equate these two categories of people only with regard to the law of tum'ah. That just like someone who you bought from the marketplace did only brit milah, they will cause tum'ah, and also the child who grows up in the Jewish home and does milah only, also they cause tum'ah. That's what the v'chen is going on, but the v'chen does not apply to the law of yain nesech. That reading is okay according to the one who says that their spit is tameh. But if you follow the other opinion in the Baraita, that said both of their spit is tahor, then what do you need the word v'chen for? If the word v'chen is not coming to tell me that the law is the same for yain nesech, and it also cannot be coming to teach me that the law is the same for their spit being tahor, because just tell me the first category. If I know that someone who's bought on the market, their spit is tahor, then certainly someone who grew up in the Jewish home, their spit would be tahor. Kamash malan, and the answer is no, I still need the word v'chen, even according to the one who says tahor, and that word v'chen will teach me a law about yain nesech, and is teaching us that avadim dumya de bnei shefachot. Ma bnei shefachot gedolim hu de osin yen nesech, ketanim en osim yen nesech. Af avadim nameh gedolim osin yen nesech, ketanim en osim yen nesech. It's to teach me that the distinction between adult and children apply to both of the categories. That the someone who is bought as a slave is the same as someone who is born from shefachot and grows up in the Jewish home, just like the child who grows up in the Jewish home, who is whose mother is a shifcha. There, we certainly make a distinction and say if that child grows up and is an adult, they make yain nesech. But they remain a child. They grew up in a Jewish home, and they're a child who doesn't even know what idolatry is, so they could never even learn it if they tried, and therefore they would not do yain nesech. So too, the word v'chen teaches me that the slave that I bought off of the market, there also same thing applies. If the slave, when I bought him off of the market, was an adult, then something he touches becomes yain nesech. But when I bought him, he was a baby. Then and the baby goes and touches something that they do not cause that to be yain nesech. So that would be the way to reconcile this baraita according to the Rav Nachman Amar Shemuel. But once we have this conclusion, la pukeh miderav, this will then exclude Rav Damarav Tinok Ben Yomo Ose Yen Nesech Kamash Malan Dela. Rav was stringent and said that a baby, even 1 day old, who's not Jewish, makes something yain nesech. And this Baraita says not so. A Canaani, a non-Jew that one buys off the marketplace, even though they're a child, 1 day old, obviously over here it says en osin yain nesech. So if we interpret the Baraita to be in accordance with Shemuel, then it will be a challenge against Rav. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'Amen.